Hello, everyone, and welcome to VWMOOC 24 and our second presentation for week 3. We are in week 3. Really exciting. Time passes really fast. And yes, we are in week 3. This is a 4-week online event in Second Life and other virtual worlds. I'd like to introduce our speaker, and you can see our speaker in Second Life, and that's Shannon Broden. Shannon is in her final semester of the MLIS program at San Jose State University, focusing on emerging technology and digital content. For the 2023-2024 school year, she served as the web coordinator of the San Jose State Student Chapter of the American Library Association, which received the ALA Student Chapter of the Year for its efforts. She's also a student member of the American College and Research Libraries Association, known also as ACRL.
Thank you to the organizers of the VWMOOC 24 for allowing me to present today. As it mentions on the slide, I am an MLIS candidate from San Jose State University and have previously earned an MA in Communications at California State University, Fullerton. Today, I will talk about Building to Educate, Evolution of Student Work in Virtual Worlds. There's a container up near me, it's a little box, that has slides, speakeasy notes, and a guide of places to visit here on SJSU's iSchool Island, some of which will be part of our discussion today. I've tested it out, and it did grant me it's a single combined card that has all that information on it. So feel free to pick that up if you like. The presentation will follow one learner's growth from basic concepts to independently creating a large exhibit without guidance. By the end of the course, meaning today's lecture, attendees should be able to apply approaches for student projects when creating their own learning objectives, and understand the growth opportunities and issues that arise for students that may do independent study in virtual worlds. Now, as to the learner profiled in this lecture, the case study is myself, and I will discuss my firsthand experiences in each of these areas, both the successes I had as well as my struggles. What is interesting to me is how some students can be given a sandbox and see it like a blank canvas and go straight to work, while others, like myself, can look at it and go, where do I start? And I see, I came to virtual worlds from playing massively multiplayer online games. So the mechanics of being in Second Life were familiar. Also in my case, I had the unusual aspect of having worked professionally in virtual worlds before I had actually come to San Jose State University. In my professional life, I helped lead teams that built those kind of experiences for others. I hadn't been the builder. I tend to be that person in a collective experience who hangs back and sees what needs doing. And if I don't know how to help, I generally end up on the sidelines. Virtual worlds are great for collaboration, but for those who have a harder time interacting with others, like me, it seems to have the potential to be daunting. Now, before I go any further, let me tell you a little more about where you are now. That's VCARA and San Jose State University's iSchool Island. VCARA is the common interest group for VR and virtual worlds that was founded here by Dr. Pat Franks in 2009. This year is the 15th anniversary of VCARA, which is open to students, faculty, and alumni. I found out about VCARA while looking through pages on the iSchool's website, and glad I did. However, before I came here, I had never done any kind of work with prim twisting or building any items. Like I said, I led teams where they did the work. So the most that I had worked on that was even remotely like this was a group that I was with. We built a home environment in a kid's virtual world where the kids would get to place pre-purchased items. So that was my starting point for learning. I merged that experience with my knowledge and interest in English literature to create my first experience called the Browning House in VCARA's Victorian influenced village. With a combination of purchased items and some gifted to me by the VCARA coordinators Bethany Winslow and Marie Vance, I learned about the mechanics of moving objects. Additionally, I learned how to make note cards and how to add note card givers to objects. However, because I didn't know all of the ins and outs of how objects worked in Second Life yet, there was a little trial and error and how one who's designing an experience in virtual worlds needs to take responsibility for one's own design's functionality. These quality assurance observations became the topic of my first poster that I did for Virtual World's Best Practices in Education in 2023, which as of 2024 can be viewed at the Virtual Worlds Education Consortium. Not only would I go on to present other posters in Second Life, but I'd later present posters in person, copies of which are here in the auditorium today, off to my avatar left, auditorium right. Most recently, I co-presented in person at the National Conference for the American Library Association alongside other librarians and educators. So from the practice that I built in Second Life first, I learned how to present posters in real life. I would add on with a Victorian-inspired post office, and this took a little longer to complete. Not because it was complicated, but because I needed to put it on pause to prepare for the poster presentation for best practices in education. The goal with this project involved learning how to integrate a research presentation into a building. The one on the upper floor here covers the history of communication in Victorian England. Looking at those two projects together, meaning Browning House and the post office, they were independent projects. In other words, they weren't assignments. The focus was learning how to do basic functions in Second Life. Like I said, I had a little bit of a learning curve because even though I understood what I needed to do, I didn't know how you did it in Second Life. However, I still hadn't worked my way up to building anything. Now that learning did come my way when I was asked to participate in the inaugural Virtual Worlds Education Consortium Student Challenge. I, plus one other individual from San Jose State University, worked as teams of individuals and also the only participants in that entire inaugural challenge from the United States. It was very good to be part of an international group of students. In order to meet the rubric, I would need to learn to build my exhibit, though I was allowed to use a purchased building as a space. Now, after the challenge, After the challenge, I would recreate the exhibit in part of the desert oasis area of iSchool Island, which is a part of the area up in the sky, similar to the Victorian-inspired village. When I designed it, it was with the intent of eventually moving it here to the iSchool Island area to be a long-term exhibit of student work. I was very grateful that arrangements were made for us to have a couple of building classes with Builder's Brewery. Remember I mentioned not knowing how to build. But as someone doing an independent study, I required more. I attended an intermediate scripting class at the Builder's Brewery and also found some nice folks in Second Life willing to help me with prim building basics and texturing. These additional classes were not assigned to me nor recommended by my instructors. As a self-directed learner, I sought these out on my own. As I mentioned, there was a rubric the Student Challenge asked us to follow, and I knew I needed to learn a lot to even match these levels. Though I didn't get any awards, I was grateful for the incentive to push myself to try new things. Additionally, in coming up with the concept, I looked at virtual world curriculum as proposed by Nelson and Erlandson in 2012 to help me create an exhibit featuring the history of communication, which, as shown in the earlier picture, I had set inside an Egyptian-themed building. I used the prim building knowledge that I acquired to work on columns, ramps, stairs, and vases. The image that I'm showing in here is me figuring out how to build a ramp for the first time that fit the aesthetics to help with accessibility. I ultimately would have to texture it, as I found the design stairs in that building that I bought difficult to navigate. I wanted it to be accessible and embrace universal design principles. So I worked on integrating a sound example into the Browning house. Specifically, there was a phonograph that played me reading a couple lines from a poem by Elizabeth Barrett Browning. This exhibit meant I had to work on a greater scale. Each item not only had a note card, but an accompanying sound file that I recorded that would play when the blocks below each of the objects were touched. I also tried scripting for the first time by adapting a script originally in one of the official Second Life books, as I hadn't learned how to do a greeter script from scratch in the Builder's Brewery classes. While in the Builder's Brewery classes, I was seeing examples of how to do things. I wasn't always getting exactly what it was that I needed to learn, which sometimes I did find a little frustrating as a learner, but I would do my best to go fill the gaps. I used the prim building knowledge, like I said, to get things in there that I wanted. My lessons learned from this were a blend of working with an assignment structure as dictated by the rubric that was set up for us by VWBPE, and yet had some freedom to create an independent exhibit since I chose the theme and what it was that I wanted to convey. The biggest challenge to date came in the form of an educator and wellness exhibit that was also for librarians, a prototype of which was shown at Virtual World's Best Practices in Education 2024. The final version can be found here at iSchool Island, underwater at our coral reef. Similar to the Student Challenge project, this was a mix of pre-built stuff and items that I created with prim twisting. However, again, the concept was completely my own. And though it was inspired by a wellness in libraries class that I was taking at the time, there was no direct tie-in to any classwork. The items that I built here were from guidance I'd received outside a builder's brewery, or tapping into things I taught myself during the course of the challenge. The one major thing that wasn't added to this particular exhibit was audio, and that was due in part to the restrictions that I needed to adhere to when I was doing the version for Virtual Worlds, Best Practices in Education. So since I had thought with that in mind when I built version 1, when I brought it down to the coral reef, I was like, can I add audio to this? And once I was dealing with the specifics and the ambiance and everything where I moved it, I realized that I wasn't going to be able to make it work. Not the same way that I had for the Student Challenge exhibit, which I kind of regret because I really like adding the audio sound for accessibility. It's something that I champion a lot. In this exhibit, I focused on highlighting different areas of wellness that had been researched, specifically about librarians and educators, and made sure that it was all information that came from peer-reviewed journals. I went out and did additional research for this exhibit. I didn't just take stuff that came out of that one unit course. Now, the biggest challenge I had, because I knew where it was going, ultimately, underwater, is that when I got truthfully, the last minute chance to show where I was on this, at Virtual World's Best Practice in Education, everything at VWBPE is assigned by biomes. And there is not an underwater biome for Virtual World's Best Practice in Education. So I had to talk to them and go, here's what I'm doing. What do you have that might fit? And they gave me this nice little plot by a waterfall, which had a slight bit of a jungle theme. And so what I found myself doing was, what could I do to make this work? I wound up adding a few extra jungle elements around it that de-accentuated items that were clearly more underwater about it. And then later, when I brought the final version down and pulled them out, it was a seamless fit. One of the things that I did do, because of the large structure that was here, was I made sure that the structure fit down there. First, I had the structure without design, the rest of the design around it already underwater. And then I built all the rest of the elements in the skybox and put them at the VWBPE exhibit, and then had to drop them in like little puzzle pieces down here. So the lesson learned here for me was, here was this large-scale independent project, and like I said, honestly, on short notice, that integrated and built on skills that I learned in all the prior projects. I was embedding note cards to direct people to the information that I had researched and putting citations for that. I'd had to prim twist for some of the items that I had built there, and in turn texture those items. I can think of several, like there's a lamp and a countertop that has a kind of a coral reef, a gray coral reef coloring to it. All that stuff I wouldn't have known how to do if I hadn't done the other projects first. There's the slide presentation that's sitting out front. Again, if I hadn't learned how to fill, like the same one we're using right here, if I hadn't learned how to do this for the post office, I wouldn't have known how to do that. And so it all built on each other. Now that said, I know I've got a long way to go. I have spent a little time, for example, trying to see how I could translate the wellness room into an equivalent in a basic room in Frame VR. And I say basic because I don't know how to really build anything yet. I just know how to either drop or import an item. For example, my FrameVR avatar is looking at this table, which was pre-provided. The banana sitting on the table, my husband actually showed me how to build in Blender. Not that he's a Blender whiz himself, but he happens to be an artist. So I know in order for me to really empower myself, I need to learn more about Blender so I can make objects and bring them in not to Second Life, to other virtual environments, to build closer to what I would like. And that's where I personally need to take my education next. So in summary, looking at my own experiences, I think there's a need to make sure that all students are on a similar foundation level, especially when working in groups. And with a self-directed situation like mine, we, by which I mean the coordinators and myself, we were able to adjust what was being worked on, at least initially, like Browning House, down to me being able to start at a level I knew, coming in at a level of access that I understood, and then constantly build on that. So I can't speak from what it would be like in a classroom environment where the students are coming in at different levels. Maybe one has spent a lot of time in virtual worlds, and to somebody this is their first experience. But it's one of those lessons that I want to take with me when I get the opportunity to educate others, is to remind myself to encourage and help build up other students so that they're not discouraged, not dissuaded, because there's so much possibility in virtual worlds, not only in what you can cover, but in allowing the exploration of creativity. And I guess I would, and I know I'm venturing off the speakeasy and just being me for a minute, but I would hate to see that creativity stifled because someone felt intimidated by the tools. And that comes down to everything I have. And there is a little time to open the floor to questions or discussions. If you're in Second Life, if there's anything you want to ask me in chat, I can revoice that as well so we get it on the recording. I don't know how questions are passed over through Zoom, if they're cut and paste into me or what, because this is the first time I've ever done this, and I thank you for your patience with that. Is there anything that anybody wants to ask or say?
Are there any questions here on Zoom?
Okay. Val is asking me, how do I feel about learning to navigate virtual worlds as a future librarian? Will this align to library work? I think a lot is about meeting people where they're at. A lot of younger users are coming in more literate of these environments and might be more approachable there. There's also the advantages of being able to connect on global scale. I think part of it too, Val, may depend on what services are going to come to be expected of the library, and I realize I need to chat this out a little bit too. because I don't have a transcriber. So pardon me a second.
Okay, yes, students are now familiar with virtual worlds.
Oh, yeah, I definitely feel, she's asking me, students are not familiar with virtual worlds and building and simulations. Do you feel it's part of literacy? I definitely feel it is part of digital literacy. And I'll be honest, I know this might take it in a whole different direction. And it's like I feel about AI. I think it falls in the need to have that. And I'm saying that as somebody, I now feel about AI the way I did coming into virtual worlds, for example. Like, I don't, when it comes to, I'm using the AI as an example for a second, because I was in a conversation with several other students at SJSU just yesterday. And I realized they know about all these things, and I don't yet. And it's not necessarily a dislike of it. For complex and involved reasons, I wasn't able to be as immersed in it as I'm now able to be if I wanted to, and I do, but I feel way behind the learning curve. But I think it's a level of digital literacy, frankly, that I need. And so yes, Val, I definitely think it's part of literacy, because it's virtual worlds are the next step up from just being on another Zoom call. It is a way of connecting globally. And therefore, digital is quite a factor in that. Meaning virtual worlds. Again, bear with me because I don't have a transcriber, and yet I'm trying to get my thoughts out in a way that makes sense to the people who are listening to me. And I hope that does.
There was a question, Val, maybe I can ask in Second Life. There's a question.
And like I said, okay, what places would I recommend for learning the basics? Okay, first off, it depends on the virtual world. Oh, great. I appreciate you letting me know that. I know that various groups. Okay, yep. VWBPE can direct to a lot of resources for those who need help learning to navigate and feel they might have added access issues. For Second Life in specific, I recommend Virtual Ability. I have personally, in an internship that I did, I have worked with General Herron. And that group I have found to be incredibly supportive. Okay, Aquilana says, what I love about SL so far is that one can create the setting you want for the message we're trying to get across by immersing people in places we create that are best to get the message across. Absolutely. Yeah. Yes, Val. I know that virtual ability is on the calendar communities page. This is good for uh, people that are listening. I just wanted to let people know that from personal experience, I have also dealt with that particular organization, and I was helping them with a library related project as an internship simultaneously with the student challenge. And that's one of the reasons I mentioned earlier that I am so passionate about accessibility. Beth, thanks for the recommendation about Caledon's orientation as well. Okay, I see there's a Zoom question that comes in. What places would you recommend for learning the basics? We're actually naming a lot of those right now. That would be a lot of those being named right now. For the record, for just if you're curious for SJSU, I wondered what what we recommended because I had created an avatar on my own sometime before I came to SJSU. SJSU actually recommends virtual ability as well. So there are a number of different resources. Some of it is dependent on what would best suit your individual needs and your understanding. Of course, I've only used one, and I think I actually came in. For me, it was a long time ago. Anybody who checks my avatar profile will know that it goes back to 2010. So I went through Second Life's own direct startup at the time. Actually, I'm impressed with experience, impressed with your efforts to learn to build outside formal training. It's interesting to hear recommendations for instructors. Do you feel like it's better to have general classes that self-help places are being suggested or one-on-one help? Okay. Okay, Ellie. Ellie is asking me about types of instructors. I think there has to be some flexibility to customize it to the student. And the reason why is because, as I said, students are now coming in with different levels of understanding. I'm not going to give away who said this, but I was in a conversation recently with someone who's known me for a while and described me as a non-digital native. And I had to stop on that one and say, that's one thing I don't consider myself. And I didn't really, either between, back up, until I really started putting this presentation together and otherwise because I was raised by a father who worked on computers my entire life. And so it's like, I've always grown up around them. But like I was talking about AI and some of the other things, there's a constant growth that's involved. And it's not just that people aren't willing to learn, it's people may not have had the opportunities to learn. We can't make assumptions people are all starting from the same point. And I've realized, in a way, the way I grew up has affected my look on that. Currently, I volunteer once a week at my local library, assisting with one-on-one smartphone help. People come in because they don't know how to open emails and do basic things with their phone that I would take for granted, and they're not that much older than me. And it's been a wake-up call to that. That is what I deal with every day, someone says. My adult students don't know how to use their digital devices to access education. Wow. Ellie hit on a key thing there. You can have that, and that's the thing is we're back to our self-directedness. If they at least come in if willing to learn what they don't know, that's a good thing. Val is mentioning that this is why digital citizenship has become imperative, as well as meta literacy. It is a personal responsibility, it says here. Now here's a question though. Okay, thanks for those who stopped in and couldn't stay for the whole thing. That's totally understood. Yeah, Sheila, I see here we're talking. You brought up digital divide among economic status and age groups. This is exactly some of what I'm encountering in my volunteering. Is that people economically, the phone is all they have, but they don't know how to use it. And some of the comments here are making me think about, and I have to say it, I really, really liked what I saw in the inaugural student challenge, and I'm sure the other groups had that ability because they had instructors that were leading them directly. And this is not to say anything, about being here. It's like I know the people I work with are busy, and so you have to if you sign on for doing stuff here as a graduate student, you need to be somewhat self-directed. But what the folks from the other institutions who were organized into groups and weren't not a team of one did, I was beyond impressed. I'm like, you all deserve to get recognition. I'm okay with the honorable mention over here in the corner. This is good. I didn't expect anything about that, but that's it's just sort of like, wow, that was actually a real inspiration to me. It's like things I need to shoot for. Okay, we've got more coming in about access. Yes, how countries with just poor internet in general, and some families, only having what they've been able to have. Access is a big thing. Absolutely. Yeah, Val is mentioning Chromebooks being, yeah, they look like a laptop, but they are limiting. We actually have one when I volunteer, so that I can look up things on the library's website because I'm in a different room. That's been my only experience with the Chromebook. You are right about them being limiting. Okay. Mention of Moodle, using it to access activities and create and interact with their classmates. There's another learning curve for me. Before interacting with this MOOC, I had never had exposure to Moodle before. So I have enjoyed getting to learn about it in the background while I've been working on everything else. Okay, we're talking the benefits of Moodle. Also mentioned with young children already having exposure to Mindtest and Roblox. And that's, yeah, to my earlier point about not knowing where the skill levels are. But Val, here's a point. Some students may only get exposure to those when they're with their friends or when they're at school because personally they can't afford the equipment for it. Back to our access. So again, do we assume that all children know this because it's so common, or like I said, I haven't been in that situation personally of teaching really young children yet, but trying to figure out ways to figure out that baseline and maintain equity. It's a good question. Nellie's mentioning that during COVID we found out who has and who hasn't. Here we got another comment. Grandson's school librarian told me they leave teaching up to each teacher, but the teachers have no training. I had to do an observation of a school library where the person at the school wasn't a librarian yet, but was in last semester of a librarian program. Wanted to be able to teach those kind of things and even basic library concepts to the students, but the teachers were never having them bring their Chromebooks to the library. She says, I can't. There's no other computers. I can't. So yeah, that is a big point, Val. Yep, Nellie, that's exactly the point that I'm making. I'm talking from California in the United States for a frame of reference. Wow, I love this. I know the Zoom recording's going, and I'm not sure how much of this can be seen. The general discussion going on is about there doesn't seem to be a value of understanding of tech and the principles around it in education in some instances. And how some people fighting to have enough computers in libraries for every child. All this ESL and digital literacy takes time. Yeah. Many teachers haven't had opportunity to learn around this whole thing. That's another quote.
We're going to say thank you to Shannon, and thank you, Val, and thank you, everyone, for this presentation and for being here and for watching this wherever you happen to be. Things to think about. I don't know if you were able to see the chat, but the conversation.
So I do see that we are coming up on time, but it's like I hate to cut this short because this is amazing. There's so much to think about here, and I feel like I learned a lot too. I kept talking a lot after a while because I'm like, I want to be a fly on the wall. And I'm learning from you too, and that's great. Again, I thank everyone for coming today. There is a little tiny survey that, and I would appreciate help in getting feedback on my presentation if you're able to do so. And the link is in Second Life, and I believe is also going to be attached to Zoom. And thank you all for coming today. And I really encourage you to come back on September 8th. And that'll be at the Fantasy Dance Club, which is down the hill. The blue transport ball that was right in front of you when you showed up will also take you down there. On September 8th at 11 a.m., we will collaborate with the Nonprofit Commons for their Common Grounds Party, which will celebrate the collaborative possibilities between librarians, educators, artists, and nonprofits, as well as the 15th anniversary of VCARA. There is a reminder card in the box. Please feel free to take that. Again, thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Shannon. Thank you, everyone. Please fill in the form. It's in the chat. Let me know if you got the form by saying yes in the chat box. Just click on it. Thank you, Andrea. There, that's a nice view of the location. Thank you for sharing that. Lovely. Look at the building. Amazing.